Today's daf is Daf Sabaches. We are starting the 7th line, the last word on the line. And today's daf is sponsored Lilu Nishmas Mars Miriam Sarah Basav Yaakov Moshe her neshama should have an aliyah, and Lilu Nishmas Mars Freda Chaya Bela Basav Yitzchak Tzvi her neshama should have an aliyah. Now the Mishnah taught us that an arusa must have her nedarim revoked by both her father and her arus. So like Gemara says, Yibaylu they asked the following question: Baal Megas Gayis or Miklash Kolish? When the husband is made for his part of the neder, does he cut away half of the neder, or does he just weaken it? I think Gemara clarifies what exactly we're asking the question regarding. Kigan, for example, the Nadir Mitrain Zaysin, she made a neder, she's not going to eat 2 kizesim of food. Bishama Aras, and her Aras heard, Vaheferla, and he was made for his part. Vachaltunun, but then she ate both of them. So Iyamrina Megas Gayas, if we say that when he was made for the neder, he cut away half of it, Lake, she should still get Malchus. That's because half of the neder is still remaining, and that means that one of these kizesim is also for her to eat. One of them is mutter for her to eat, but the other one is still usher, and she should get Malchus. However, Iyamrina Miklash Kolish, if you say that he weakens the neder, Yisur Ba'almahu, she was only over an Isser, which means that by the husband being made for the neder, he downgraded the neder from being something very strong that she would get Malchus for being over to something on a lower level that she would not get Malchus for being over. So what is it? The Gemara tells us Tashma, we have a Brisa. And this Brisa is commenting on a Mishnah later on. The Mishnah later on discusses a Naira Murasa and tells us the following: if her father dies, his right to be made for her nedarim does not transfer to the Aras. Therefore, she cannot get hafara for any of her nedarim now. However, if the Aras dies, his right to be made for a nedarim does transfer to the father, so the father is now able to be made for a nedarim all on his own. Now this brisa is a 5-part brisa, which at its conclusion, we're going to have the answer to this question. So part 1 of the brisa, Emasai Amru Mesa Bal Nisrek Rishos La'av, when is that we said that when the father dies, his rishos, his ability that he has to be made for her nedarim, gets emptied or gets transferred to the father? That's Bizman Shalai Shama Habal Kaidim Shiamos. If the husband hadn't heard of her neder before he died. Now we're just going to switch around the next 2 statements. Aisha Shama of a Hafer, Aisha Shama of a Shasak, or he heard her neder and he was made for it, or he heard her neder and he was quiet, Umeis by Bayayim, and he died on the same day that this neder was made. Zuishi Shaninu, that's what was taught, Mesa Baal and Rishos La'av, that when the husband dies, the Rishos is transferred to the father, and now the father is able to be made for all of her nedarim. What's the common denominator over here? That the Aras didn't confirm the neder before he died. When he didn't confirm it before he died, so now the Rishos to be made for her nedarim gets transferred to her father, and her father could be made for all of her nedarim. The Brisa continues, Samachetson Bez on top. This is still part of the first case. Avolim Shama V'Kayim, if her husband heard and was Makayim that neder, Asha Shama V'Shasak, or he heard and he was quiet, Umeis Bayem Shal Achrav, and he died the next day, and Yachal Hafer, so the father is not able to be made for this neder anymore. That's because there was already a kiyum on the neder. Part 2 of the Brisa, Shama Avia, her father heard the neder, Vehefer Lo, and he was made for her neder for her. V'Lo Hispik Baal Lishmaya, and the husband didn't have a chance to even hear the neder yet. Ad Shemeis Ha'av, and then the father died. Zuisha Shaninu, this is what was taught in the Mishnah, Meis Ha'av, that if the father died, the rishos that the father has to be made for her nedarim does not get transferred to the husband. Now this that we mentioned, that the husband didn't have a chance to hear the neder, is important, but we're not going to be focusing on it now. We're going to be focusing on it later on, tomorrow's daf and the next daf. Moving on to the 3rd case of the brisa. Shama Baila, her husband heard the neder, Veheferla, and he was made for it for her. And the father didn't have a chance to hear the neder yet, Ad Shemeis Habal, and now the husband died. So the husband was made for the neder, but then he died before the father was able to hear it. Zuisha Shaninu, this is another case that we learned. Meis Habal, if the husband died, Nisrek Rishos La'av, the Rishos now goes to the father, and the father now has the ability to make for the entire neder. The reason why this is different than the first case in the Brisa is because the first case of the Brisa is talking about where the father did hear the neder. Over here we're talking about where the father didn't hear the neder. And again, as we said, we're going to talk about why that's important, the father hearing it or not hearing it, tomorrow and the next day. On to the 4th case of the Brisa. Shama Baila V'Heferla, her husband heard the neder and he was made for it for her. V'Lo Hispeko Av Lishmaya Ad Shemeis, the father didn't have a chance to hear it, and now it was the father that died. Ein Habal Yachal Hafer, the husband is not able to be made for the neder on his own. Shein Habal made for El B'Shutfas, because the husband can only be made for the neder B'Shutfas. It has to be a combination. It has to be a joint effort between him and the father died, so therefore the husband is not able to be made for this neder. And on to Samach Tes Alf on the top. Here's the last case of the Brisa, and this is where the proof, this is where the answer is going to come from. Shama Avia, her father heard the neder V'Heferlan, he was made for it for her. V'Lo Hispek Habal Lishmaya Ad Shemeis, and the husband didn't have a chance to hear the neder, and then he died. Chayzer Avu made for Chel the father now goes and he's able to be mefer the chelek of the husband. So again, just to clarify, the father heard the neder, he was mefer it. The husband did not hear the neder and he died. The father now can be mefer the entire neder. Now Rav Nassan says, Hein divrei Beis Shammai. These are the words of Beis Shammai, meaning this last case of the Brisa is Beis Shammai. However, Beis Hillel says, Ein yachal lahafer, that in this last case of the Brisa, the father is not able to be mefer the neder. Now Shema Mina, what do we see from here? Le Beis Shammai megas gayis. According to Beis Shammai, when the husband is mefer the neder, he cuts it in half. Le Beis Hillel, but according to Beis Hillel, when the husband is mefer the neder, meklash kalish, he just weakens the neder. Shema Mina, we have our answer to our question. Now how do we see that from here? So according to Beis Shammai, in this last case, where the father was made for his part of the neder before the husband died, and all he needs to do now is be made for the husband's chelek, so it must be that each party affects half of a hafara, and therefore when the husband died, there's simply another half waiting for hafara. But according to Beis Hillel, that the father is now unable to be made for the entire neder, it must be that each party weakens the neder. So when the father was made for it, what he accomplished was downgrading the neder to being a low-level neder, but this low-level neder cannot be transferred into his rishos. So we have an answer to our question. According to Beis Shammai, when each party is made for their half of the neder, they're actually being made for half of the neder. According to Beis Hillel, when each party is made for their part of the neder, they're simply weakening the neder, they're not being made for half of it. We're going to stop here for the day, pick up tomorrow with asking more questions on Hafaras Nedarim. For now, everyone should have a wonderful day.